I'm a math man, yeah, I count cans, live in a trailer with rusted pants. Mom's dog's bald, it's got no flair, lost all its hair, and it don't care. Pink blankets, lies I've told again, footprints vanish like phantom friends. I'm Superman, Daniel, faster than wind, stronger than a chopper with a rotor spin. I rake my driveway for Mom shakes her fist. Super Daniel, yeah, I can't be missed.
I like this one better, I think.
Not allowed on Mama's ATV. She says I drive it recklessly. X wrote her name on my mirror in red. Now I'm searching cold, it's like I lost my head. Dirt roads, rivers, waist high deep. Virginia slims, I puff and leap. I'm Superman, Daniel, faster than wind, stronger than a chopper when the rollers spin. I rake my driveway for Mom shakes her fist. Super Daniel, yeah, I can't be missed. No, I'm on Mama's ATV. She says I drive it recklessly. X wrote her name on my mirror in red. Now I'm searching covers like I lost my head. Dirt roads, rivers, waist high deep. Virginia slims, I puff and leap. I'm Superman, Daniel, arrogant and bold, strutting pop lines in the cold. Work one day a week at the sawmill grind. Super Daniel, yeah, on my time. I'm Superman, Daniel, arrogant and bold, strutting pop lines in the cold. Work one day a week at the sawmill grind. Super Daniel, yeah, on my time.
Even with me running through the woods over the head of the helicopters and head of the drones and stuff like that.
That's a good one.
Okay, hi all. I just thought I wanted to start with that one just as a bit of a light-hearted start to this whole thing. And while I'm yabbering, I'm also searching for other things that I had queued up because I've learnt that the StreamYard just doesn't allow me to... Oh, okay, hang on. That's not working either. I'll go cancel. StreamYard doesn't allow me to load things up when I thought it did. But anyway, welcome in everyone. It's good to see everyone in here. And I'm just uploading a screen right now, which just random screen. Anyway, okay, so this is going to be a more relaxed live stream. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Amira is scrabbling around in her bed under the desk trying to make a nest, and I'm already distracted. So, way to go. This one, I wanted to do it as more of just a relaxed general discussion, address a few questions that have been raised, that sort of thing. Now, before I jump in, I'm not sure if any of my other mods are in here, but if you are watching on replay or anything like that, I have downsized my channel in terms of moderators. So I hate doing this, but I have stripped a few people of moderator powers for now. I just want to keep it within just a close circle of people who I am in regular contact with, because it just makes it easier for me behind the scenes to be able to get in contact with just that group of people ahead of a live stream and, you know, have everyone on the same page as opposed to trying to contact multiple people. So there's a few people who for now have been removed from moderators. There is nothing that don't be offended by it. It is nothing that you've done. It is nothing about you. It is just me wanting to streamline the process for myself to make it easier, because me being me, typical ADHD, I am such a perfectionist that I basically have to have everything sorted before I do a live stream. And if I've just got a handful of people that I'm communicating with, that makes life easier. Okay, so I've got a short list of things that I am going to talk about. And then towards the end of this, I'm hoping that maybe people will have things to suggest or questions or stuff like that, that we can also go into. I still want to keep it kind of short. I don't like doing longer live streams. And of course, here in Australia, it's a bit after 11. So finishing about lunchtime for me works really well. So just a few of the things that I am going to cover in this. I'm going to talk about, we've got Daniel's court case coming up in, or his first court date coming up in about 2 weeks. And I'm just going to go through the process for people that may not be completely aware. And hey to, do you say Tatel 3483? Welcome to membership. Way to go. I didn't get to thank somebody last live stream who gifted some memberships. So if you're in here, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can expect with this court date on the 2nd of March. I'm also going to talk about the likelihood of more searches from RCMP, talk about the next Please Bring Me Home search. There's a, oh yeah, and I should also mention the dogs are really, really unsettled today. So you may get a lot of barking or craziness in the background. I don't know what that is about, but about 5 minutes before going live, they just started being crazy. Where was I? Okay, I'm also going to discuss a few posts that Belinda's put up, because sometimes she says some things that are really profound and I think are worthy of discussion. And also, I'm just turning my page here. I talk about Cindy, a few things to do with her, and then moving on to people's questions and comments. Yeah, Bonza Sheila, I have changed the dog's play area. I have completely changed their world. It was a whole thing of not just moving, getting rid of one desk, moving another desk, but I also got rid of a massive sofa. I have chaos everywhere still from trying to rearrange my house to make more room for my Mac and for my audio setup. And yeah, the dogs are still adapting. Although that said, they are quite happy that they still have their bed underneath my desk. And I think Amira's under there. I haven't checked. But if Amira's not under there and Mouse beat her to it, you may hear her yipping at him through the live stream, telling him to get out and let her have the good bed. They are nutters. They truly, truly are. Okay, so I am trying to read people's comments in here at the same time, but I'm going to have to limit that to some extent because I do get distracted. I have put new batteries in the iRig, in the interface, so I shouldn't have the issue that I had last time. And I mentioned to members, but I will mention to everyone, I have actually ordered a better quality interface, so I shouldn't have any more issues with audio suddenly going crackly or the battery suddenly dying, because the new interface is like, really good studio quality. My brother's a professional musician. He also is a professional recording person. He not only does his own albums, but he does recording for other bands, other musicians. So I basically said to him, okay, what do I get? So the interface that I've ordered is recommended by a professional, so it should be good quality. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about Daniel's upcoming court date, because someone pointed out to me that there may be a few people that are not sure of the process, and I think also talking it through, there may be some things that I might not be 100% correct on. I did sit down and do all my research last night to try and make sure that I was being accurate. Wow, 1:12 a.m. here in France. I'm so glad you made it. Thank you for joining us. I try to do these lives to fit everybody in. It is tricky because Australia is on a different time from all you guys, and Canada and US, it's kind of evening there. So if you're in France or England or something, it does make it a bit more challenging. Okay, so I did research last night to make sure that I had my facts right. It does seem that the Canadian justice system is very, very similar to the Australian justice system, which makes sense because obviously we are both Commonwealth countries, and our justice system is built on the Westminster system from England. So there are so many similarities. So I will try to make sure that I get the terminology right, because that's the thing where I may get caught up in terms of terminology with some things in Canada are a bit different from how you would describe them in Australia. So bear with me. So the first thing that I want to point out, and this is something that in reverse for me, if you are American, this may be something that you did not know. But yeah, we're all British Crown law, it's all the same system. And we all both seem to have somewhat toothless court systems at times. But don't get me started on that right now. So one thing that confused me when I started covering American cases is that in America, judges, I believe, are actually voted in. Is that correct? So, like, they're voted into office or something like that, which is really bizarre, because in Canada and Australia, they are appointed by either provincial government or federal government. Of course, in Australia, state government instead of provincial government. But it's something where they are appointed to the position because basically they've done the work. They are lawyers or barristers who have done the hard yards. They've been recognised for their work. Depending on where you live, of course, there is at least one state in Australia where judges are appointed because of who they know. So judges are voted in America, right? So yeah, very, very different from Australia and Canada, because for us, they are appointed by government, whether it's local government or federal government. Federal government is your Supreme Court justices, whereas state and provincial government, they're your lower courts, which I think is referred to as a provincial court in Canada. I won't confuse things by trying to explain every term. Also, judges can be elected and appointed in the US. I'm going to have to research that and do a video just doing a quick comparison. I don't know about Canberra. I was actually thinking of a certain state where mainlanders have this concept of people having two heads. If you follow what I'm saying there, Bonds of Sheila, I might as well say it. Tasmania. It is so backwards. It is so corrupt. I'm just going to say it outright. Tasmania is so corrupt. There is such a boys' club in Tasmania, especially in the judicial system. And you can guarantee that in Tasmania, most of the judges who are judges got there because of the boys' club, because either it's a family thing and their father was a judge previously, which you so often see, or because they do have the right connections. It is just the way it is. I won't go into that further because I could go on so much about Tasmania and all the corruption, all the nepotism and stuff like that. There is a very short playlist in my channel on Sue Neil-Fraser, who, this is a major miscarriage of justice case in Australia. She lives in Tasmania and she was convicted for the murder of her partner on pretty much no evidence. And a lot of the evidence was made up by the prosecution. Her lawyer was part of the boys' club, so he just let it go. I won't go into that too much here, but it is very eye-opening when you start to dig into Sue's case and you start to see the level of corruption and the level of nepotism that exists in Tasmania. So, having gone down that road, I'll get back to talking about Daniel and about the Canada court system. So, yeah, the judges in Canada, yeah, Tassie was a penal settlement. That's pretty much how Australia started. They sent all the convicts here. Mainly, first of all, the convicts were sent to New South Wales. So, those of you who are in Sydney, were the original convicts, and then Tassie, and then other states. Tassie was hardcore in terms of the convicts, the conditions like Port Arthur and that were just really inhumane. But yeah, so we were a penal settlement. We were basically, a lot of Australians can trace their ancestry back to convicts. I think I have about 3 convicts in my ancestry, some from Sydney, some from Tassie, some from Sydney that moved down to Victoria. So, yeah, that's kind of background with us. And Tasmania never seems to have gotten beyond the sort of corruption that existed in the early days of the penal colony. But anyway, that's for another conversation. So the process for Daniel. So we know he's been through the arrest process. He was bailed out and he had to fill out that form, which was basically him agreeing to conditions, him seeing basically what the charges were, that sort of thing. Now, when you have a situation like this where someone is released on bail, that doesn't mean that they've had to pay money for bail. So in his case, he was probably just released on bail, as in released, but not charged anything. Generally, the only time you're going to see bail set where there's actually financial costs is if it is things like murder charges and stuff like that. Yes, Ponza Sheila, they're judges now. Honestly, if you just look at judges and politicians in Tassie, you will see all these family connections everywhere. Okay, so we've had that. Daniel's been arrested, he's been charged, he's been released, and he's going back on the 2nd of May. Do I think Janie will be charged? I actually think, and I said this in my last video, because it comes down to the discretion of the prosecutor. They have prosecutorial discretion. And I wouldn't be surprised Yeah, well, we get all our court stuff from the UK, Saza. So our court system is based on the British court system. Okay, so in terms of Janie, will she get charged? I wouldn't be surprised if, and I hate to think this, but it wouldn't surprise me if maybe she ends up not being charged because the judge may look at her age and her health, not the judge, the prosecutor, may look at her age and her health and decide that it's not in public interest to prosecute, especially because when you start throwing in those factors, the chance of getting a conviction is diminished. If you look at, and I know this is not in Canada, but if you look at the Kristen Smart case, a few years ago, they finally took Paul Flores to trial. This was the guy, she was a college student back in 1996 that went missing. It took them 20-something years to finally nab Paul Flores, and he is now in jail for the rest of his life, or prison, sorry. They also charged his father, Reuben, for helping out. I can't remember what the exact charges were, but his father, Reuben, they had basically buried Kristen under his deck, and she had been there for 20-something years. And then when they found out that, the police were sniffing around again, Paul's mother and her partner went in, they dug up Kristen's remains, moved them, and we don't know where they are. So Kristen still hasn't been found. Paul Flores was arrested, he was taken to trial, and they had so much evidence showing that there had been remains under the deck of his house. And to me, the evidence was so compelling. Like, it seemed like there's no way this guy was not going to get a jury going, yeah, guilty. But at the same time, he was like 84 or something. He was old. And the jury came back with a non-guilty verdict, which was so wrong. So it is possible that a prosecutor might look at a case relating to Janie and say, we're not going to get this to the point of a conviction, so let's not follow through. Personally, I want to see everybody who was involved do jail time. But I have my concerns with Janie, and I also have my concerns in terms of mitigating factors that could be used to get Malaya off a jail sentence. We've seen from the latest lot of redactions that were lifted that her lawyer is definitely going to play the native card. And I think the mental health card will also be played. So that's going to make it challenging. If you add in one mitigating factor, then that does make it challenging. But if you have two huge mitigating factors like that, then it is possible that Malaya may not get a prison sentence. Like I said, I think they all deserve some time in prison. I think Daniel needs to be locked up for life. That's just my thoughts. So, talking about prosecutors deciding if a case is going to go to trial and stuff like that. So, after Daniel's arrest, a case brief would have gone to the prosecutor, would have had an evidence brief and stuff like that. And I think they're called the Crown Attorney or Crown Prosecutor in Canada. We just call them a public prosecutor here, or most of the time it's just a police prosecutor. his file would have gone to the Crown Attorney. They would have looked at it to decide if it is going to proceed, if it's in public interest to proceed. So the two things they have to look at is there a realistic prospect of conviction? And is it in the public interest to proceed? They're the two things that they have to look at in terms of deciding if a case is going to progress to the court system. Now, I have to look into this Gallardo report because a few people have mentioned to me about that, and I haven't had a chance to research it yet. I'm going to just make myself a quick note so I can actually look that up. So I'm just going to kind of waffle very slowly while I write that, because otherwise I will forget to look it up. I've forgotten where I was at now. Okay, just pausing while I'm just going to flip the page and just continue past the talking about the prosecutor and their decision of whether or not to progress. But clearly, they're not going to do this arrest with Daniel unless they have really solid evidence, because I still strongly believe that this is basically the beginning of the ending for Daniel. This is their way, RCMP's way of shoring up future charges. It definitely suggests that what happened to Lily and Jack was as a result of Daniel's temper, which is a little bit disturbing. But you see this in cases where you have these smaller charges coming in first, and I'm not trying to diminish these charges. They're not small in significance, but if you look at them alongside what is coming for Daniel, then they are smaller charges. Because if they can get these charges through, this is going to establish a history of violence with Daniel, a history of unpredictability, a history of being quick to anger and things like that, a history of bad decisions. And this will be used against him in court when we go to trial for Jack and Lilly. Of course, his defence is going to try and fight it and have it considered to be not admissible, because they'll say, well, it's a separate case. But the prosecutor, whoever it is, will say, well, actually, this is really, really important to the case because it proves what we're talking about. Okay, so moving on, we have Daniel's arraignment on the 2nd March, or mentioned. Now, this can go a few different ways. First of all, he has to turn up beforehand, and that's when he's got to do his fingerprints and they take his DNA. So that's the appearance for the purposes of criminal identification or something like that. So he will turn up, they'll take his fingerprints, they'll take DNA, they'll probably take photos, that sort of thing. And the thing I find interesting with that is the difference again. So in Australia, if someone is arrested, I believe that's when they do fingerprints and photos and DNA, like not when they go to court. It's not up to the court to do that. It's actually the police who do it. And based on Stephen Stearns, I know with his trial that it was when they were taking him after he made his plea that they then were collecting fingerprints and DNA and stuff, unless in America they do it a few times. But I just thought that was interesting. So that's going to happen first. That's something that is not like publicly seen. That's just, processes in the background. And then At 9:30 he has his hearing. This is the arraignment in the provincial court. And the offences are going to be read. So they will go through what the charges are, unless there are delays. Now, I don't know how Canada is with delays, but in Australia, you can bet that this process is going to be dragged out. So with the Phoebe Bishop case, they pretty much haven't gone beyond this point. There's been instances where the accused haven't appeared for some reason or other. There's been instances where they've claimed that they lost files, all sorts of things. So it is possible that you could see delays such as Daniel might turn up and might be like, I haven't got a lawyer yet. And you can probably get away with that once. And he'll be sent away with, okay, you need to come back on this date with a lawyer. You don't want to get a judge offside though, so it's probably not a good idea. I would imagine that in Nova Scotia, like in Australia, that the judge you have is going to be the judge that follows you through. So if he does try to delay things, it's going to get the judge offside. So there could be delays like that. There could be delays with the defence saying, hey, I've only just got this case yesterday and I haven't had a chance to really converse with my client yet. So we're not sure how we're going to go ahead and we would like a continuance. I've seen that happen before too. So they could ask for a continuance, which again will mean that the date will be pushed back. You get this sort of stuff happening in Australia all the time. It's like they just throw in every delay possible. I'm not sure if we're going to see this with Daniel's case. I don't know how extreme Canada is in terms of lawyers playing these games, but certainly it's a possibility. But if everything goes ahead, the charges are read. Now, I said when I looked through the charges that it looks like possibly it is a indictable, or they are all indictable offences. But what is interesting is that all these offences can be charged as summary offences or indictable offences. The difference being, if it's a summary offence, it's going to stay in the provincial court. It is going to go before a judge in the provincial court, and that's where it stays. If it is indictable, he gets a choice as to whether or not he is tried in the provincial or if it goes up to the Supreme Court, which I think that's what you call it in Canada as well. So the charges are going to be read. Now, if they are summary offences, so if it's going to stay in the provincial court, then he may enter a plea. He can turn around and say that his lawyer might say, oh, look, he's not ready to enter a plea. We need to converse more. This is where the stalling happens. We don't have discovery. I've only had him on my case for a day or so, that sort of stuff. So they may find ways to avoid him making a plea on day one. But if he does make a plea, then a date will be set for trial in that provincial court. But he's only going to make a plea if these are summary offences, unless if they're indictable offences and he chooses to be tried in provincial court, he can then enter a plea. Now, we know he's going to enter a not guilty plea regardless. But that's just, that's the process. So the judge will also after he has entered a plea or made a request to go to Supreme Court, the judge is going to go through the conditions, the existing conditions that are imposed on him. So I went through those in the video where I looked at the charges and the conditions and stuff like that, the undertaking form that I spoke about. The judge will go through those conditions and the judge may add additional conditions. He will almost certainly be released on bail again. So I don't think with these charges that he is going to be put in jail. He's just going to be released and they're going to expect him to turn up again for his next court date. Okay, I need to turn the page and stop me if I'm getting things wrong or if I'm going too fast or stuff. I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering all of it, and I hope I'm not inadvertently throwing in interpretations of Australian law when I should be sticking with Canadian law, because sometimes, the brain overrides things. Will we ever hear Daniel's ex-wife say anything? I think she is going to stay extremely quiet for the sake of her children, because her daughter, at the very least, is old enough to be aware of these sorts of things. She's old enough for her friends to be aware of these sorts of things. So I would imagine that Daniel's ex-wife is doing her best right now to stay off the radar and protect the children. You can bet that when it gets to Lily and Jack's case, that they're going to call her as a witness. I would imagine they have interviewed her, but we're not going to see that on the documents, again, for the sake of privacy and stuff like that. What do I think will happen on March the 2nd? I wouldn't be surprised if we do see delays. Given what Daniel is like, I wouldn't put it past him to only go into legal aid a few days before his court date. And then his lawyer is going to be heading into court going, I'm not prepared because I only got this case. I think I think this could be really slow getting into the court system. He definitely, either way, whether it stays in provincial court or goes to a Supreme Court, I don't think he's going to offer a plea. I actually think, and I may be wrong, and I want to hear what other people think, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants it to stay in provincial court, because going up to the next level, to the Supreme Court, even though he does get the option, then going to Supreme Court, you then factor in the possibility of having jurors. And Daniel has this desperate need for control. There's no way he would want this case in front of a jury. So to that end, he might actually decide that he wants it to stay in the provincial court. Or his lawyer could actually ask the judge for a preliminary report, and I'll come back to that shortly, because I know I've got notes on that, and it's probably better if I go off my notes rather than try and remember it. Actually, I can see that right there. So he, like I said, he chooses, if these are considered indictable offences, and I strongly suspect that they are, he gets the choice between Supreme or provincial court. But like I said, I think we're going to see this drag out. I think he's going to get to court on March the 2nd. There's going to be some excuse to reschedule. So it's going to be continued. He'll get a continuance. Judges don't like continuance, so he'll probably only get so many. But I really suspect that's what we're going to see. So I don't think we're going to hear much coming out. So, yeah, he's going to have the option. If he chooses Supreme Court, then he doesn't have to enter a plea on March the 2nd, because when someone has to enter a plea, they do that in the court where they're going to be trialed. So if it is staying in the provincial court, yes, he may enter a plea on March the 2nd. And we know that plea will be not guilty because that's Daniel. If he says he wants to go to the Supreme Court, he's not going to enter a plea until it gets its first mention in the Supreme Court. Now, if they do elect to go to the Supreme Court, then they can ask the provincial court for a preliminary inquiry. I think in Australia we call that a pre-sentence hearing, and this is where the judge will actually go through the case and have a look and decide if there is enough evidence to go to trial. Oh, so it's not, Christine, are you in Canada? You're saying that it isn't uncommon for it to be adjourned for a later date, like it is in Australia, because that is one of the biggest tactics that is used here in Australia. It is really frustrating, I have to say, when, like, the Phoebe Bishop case, the number of delays with that, it's gone nowhere so far. Yeah, I think they will be pushing for it to go to the Supreme Court, not just because of the seriousness, but also because I think the importance of this for Lily and Jack's case. So I think that they are going to be pushing for it to go to Supreme Court. So if the judge says, yeah, there's enough evidence for this to go to trial, then it goes into the Supreme Court. And again, they decide if they want to do this with a jury or if they want the judge to do the decision. And that's when we start going ahead with the trial. But there's going to be delays. There's going to be so many continuances before we get to a trial. There's going to be different hearings in terms of, you can bet that one side's going to turn around and say, we've got an issue with the evidence. You can bet that the defense is going to say, you know, we haven't received something, all that sort of stuff. If he goes to the Supreme Court, he'll have to go to Halifax. Oh, right, yeah. So in terms of going to Halifax as opposed to having it in Pictou County, I can imagine him wanting to do that because it's away from the locals. So that could be, yeah, very interesting. Oh, wow, I didn't know that either, Buttercup. So if Daniel agrees to be held in jail until court, it can count to time and a half. He wouldn't do that, though. He's so controlling, and he wouldn't want to be away from his rugs. I think looking at that last interview, I honestly felt like he seems to be going more heavy on it, if you ask me. So I think I've kind of gone through the process until it actually reaches the point where it's go ahead. Obviously, you're going to have like hearings in between when it actually goes to whichever court. So they'll have progress hearings where they discuss the progress of the case. Have they got the evidence? Have they received their briefs and stuff like that? But for now, what we're looking at is basically just a mention in court. The charges will be read. He will decide. Yeah, they do to bench court, I think. The charges will be read. He'll decide if he's staying in provincial or going to Supreme. He may enter a plea. He probably won't because he's Daniel. And then we go from there. So I'm going to move on from talking about the court stuff. Yeah, I want to see people charged with contempt. I want to see a lot of people facing charges over this case. I do worry that Janie is not going to be prosecuted. I mentioned in yesterday's video that there is probably a good case there for elder abuse from the sounds of what's going on there with Daniel. But I would still like to see her facing charges. Oh, do I think Malaya will get Meadow back if she's not criminally charged? Yes, that is quite possible. The goal when it comes to Children's Protective Services is always to try and keep the children with their family, to try and find solutions to fix whatever's broken. So if Malaya walks away from this without charges, yes, Meadow could end up back with her. And given Meadow's condition, when they took Meadow away from her in the first place, I find that extremely alarming because we've seen so many cases where children are returned to their parents. There's like this period where they're being watched carefully to make sure they're looking after the children and they're on their best behaviour. And then eventually the Children's Protective Services are like, yeah, okay, we're going to dismiss the case now because everything seems good, and they just go back to their old habits. So I think if Meadow goes back to Malaya, it's a bad thing, in my opinion. I know that a lot of people think, well, it's better for children to be with their parents, but in some instances, I think they are better off just not going back to their parents. Meadow looked so sickly in those photos around the time that Lily and Jack went missing. So anyway. Wow. So Buttercup, you're in I can't remember which province you're in, but you're saying that elder abuse just doesn't stick in court. I think it's a fairly new thing. I thought so. Yep, PEI. I think elder abuse is a fairly new thing, so I think it needs a trial case somewhere in Canada, somewhere in Australia, to really set that precedent for future cases. So I think it needs a good case where it is going to stick, where there's going to be a good judge. It does stick in Manitoba, good. I've not heard of any cases mentioned here in Australia, but in Australia, they pretty much don't tell you any sort of crimes unless they are like bigger ones. So I don't think we'd even know. Yeah, Christine, that is a good point. Belinda did say Malaya was a good mum until she was with Daniel. And that's going to be something that her lawyers will be pushing for, if she's not charged with anything, or if doesn't get a criminal conviction. But yeah, I think she will get Meadow back. If she doesn't get a conviction, she'll get Meadow back. I just hope that the people around her, like Cindy and Patty and that, are going to keep a really close eye on her and make sure that she's looking after her, especially if she does the Malaya thing of ending up with another partner, because you tend to see a cycle with people like this, which could be a bad thing for Meadow. It could also be a bad thing for Malaya. Now I'm going to move on to a few different things. Yeah, they didn't keep an eye on her at Lansdowne Station, and that's my concern. You know, Cindy is a nurse. We know that she was, at the very least, taking Jack and Lily for visits. And yet none of them were being well cared for. I think families need to be less afraid to step in situations like this. You know, it's the same with the Maddie Soto case. Maddie's grandmother wasn't comfortable with the situation with Stephen Stearns and that living arrangement, and she never said anything. And Stephen Stearns's mother was aware that they had Maddie sharing a bed, 13-year-old girl sharing a bed with Stephen and Jen. And all she did was say, "This is not appropriate, don't do it." And she has admitted that, hey, I knew that they wouldn't pay any attention to me, so I didn't bother following up on it. So, you know, Maddie Soto could still be alive today if family members had have looked at what was going on in that household and said, this is not right. One person could have called CPS. But there's this thing in families that you don't interfere. And I think this is something that needs to go. Because maybe if Cindy had spoken up, maybe if Cindy had reported them, then things might have been different. So, and yeah, if Meadow goes back to Malaya, yes, they will monitor the situation. Yes, the roommates with Maddie Soto too, they knew what was going on. I don't care what they say, they knew that Maddie was sharing a bedroom with Stephen Stearns. There's no way you can have a room that is that close. Their rooms were adjacent. That upstairs in that townhouse, everything was so squished in together, those roommates had to know that Maddie was in a bedroom with a 37-year-old man. I get so riled up over Maddie's case because so many people let her down. And again, with Lily and Jack, it feels that there were people that let them down as well. And yeah, with Meadow, yeah, she'll be monitored for a period of time, and then they're going to turn around and say, yep, all is good, and they're going to stop monitoring her unless someone puts in a report for something. And this goes back to people not reporting things. So, you know, it's not a good thing. To me, it is extremely, extremely disturbing. So, no, Grover, Maddie did not get justice. I do not believe that anybody who is responsible for grapes with children on multiple occasions, who has thousands and thousands of images and then who actually murders that child, that person should not be allowed to enter a no contest plea. That should be off the table completely. No contest is saying, I accept that you've got these charges against me. I'm not going to plead guilty, but I accept that you've got the charges and the evidence. So, yes, you can impose a penalty on me. It should be, especially when it involves children, it should have been either a guilty or not guilty. If it was not guilty, go to trial. He basically, yes, he's gone to jail for life, but essentially it feels like he got off scot-free. He has not had to face the consequences for his actions at all. He can continue in his little fantasy world where he basically can turn around and say, it wasn't me, I did nothing wrong, because he's never had to face up to it. Had it gone to trial, then he would have had to have faced up to everything he did. Not only that, his parents would have had to have faced up to everything he did. And then, had it not gone to trial, but he actually pled guilty, then maybe the judge would have got off his lazy butt and done a decent sentencing speech. Because that statement from the judge in the Maddie Soto case was disgusting. He didn't prepare that beforehand. He just listened to the people who were basically giving their victim impact statements. I reckon he jotted down probably not even half a page of notes, and he basically spat that out. There was nothing there that would have made Stephen Stearns turn around and look at it in terms of what he did. He has never, ever, ever had to face up to what he did. That is not justice for little Maddie. And then to allow him, after the judge has made his sentencing statement, to allow Stephen to make a statement which sounded like a victim impact statement. It was despicable. It was disrespectful to all the family members who were there and gave their victim impact statements. And it gave him the last word. And Grover just put exactly the same thing. I was so livid. Even now, like, I'm not going to be able to talk on it much because I get so angry about that. Maddie deserved so much better. And I need to step away from that and talk about Lily and Jack again because, as you all know, I was very heavily and still am very heavily emotionally invested in Maddie's case. I covered that from, less than a week in. I was one of the first channels on the case as well. I think I came in after Grizzly, but only, a day or two after Grizzly started talking about Maddie's case. And yeah, I still get riled up over it. So let's go back to something else in terms of these beautiful children. And what I wanted to look at was some comments that Belinda made, because I thought they were, right, spot on. I thought this was really sweet. I heard the words, they're not just sister and brother, they're like best friends. They do everything together. And they are. They truly are like best friends. And what Belinda said is something that has given me a lot of comfort over the last month since I, realised that they're not around anymore. Lily May and Jackie Boy disappeared on May 2nd, 2025. They were together. This is a painful case, but at least we know they were together. I'm going to back up. Yes, Janie and Deborah Stearns. Oh my gosh, they really are birds of a feather. These mothers who enable their sons and then don't actually look at what they've done, don't face up to what their child has become. You can add in Roberta Laundrie to that. All three of those women enabled their sons, and they raised monsters, in my opinion. Anyway, getting back to Belinda's statements, because I get so riled up over Maddie's case, and as you can probably tell, this other statement from Belinda nails it perfectly. What kind of person hides from questions but not from the public? We know exactly who that is. What kind of person is always the victim in life? We also know who that person is. What kind of person manipulates others? And we know who that person is. That person has been putting out a narrative for the last 9 months, trying to put the blame on anyone but themselves. What kind of person takes no accountability? Again, we know who that is, and Belinda has got, you know who you are. So I'm glad that Belinda is starting to come out with some of the harder comments, because it is so true. It is this lack of accountability from these men. Stephen Stearns was the same, and he still is. Now, I'm not following any of the things that are being shared in terms of what he's saying now that he's still in jail, but I have no doubt that he's still pleading his innocence, still finding some excuse. But yeah, as Buttercup says, they are selfish cowards. They've never had to take accountability. And yeah, it makes me so very livid. Now, I did have a few other things listed that I wanted to talk about, but I think this is probably a good time to finish it here with Belinda's words, because I think these are some good things that Belinda has pointed out here. And I think this is a really good spot to end the live. But if there's any more questions or comments or something, feel free to add them. I hope he chokes on his root beer barrels. This is Stephen Stearns. Him and his root beer barrels that his parents are buying him. All this stuff that Stephen Stearns' parents are buying him while he is in jail, it disgusts me. I know they're his son, but I really hope he chokes on his root beer barrels. And I hope that the place that makes the root beer barrels stops selling them to the jails, or that the jail can no longer get hold of the root beer barrels, because that would be great punishment for Stefan to not be able to get any more of those damn things. So, having got totally riled up about Stephen Stearns, trust me, I'm not done with talking about Maddie's case, but I needed a break from her case after his ridiculous plea, after him being allowed to plead no contest. I just had to step away from Maddie's case and take a break. But I definitely do want to talk about that more, because it is an injustice, if you ask me. Anyway, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to finish it here with Belinda's words, because Belinda is such a wise person, and really sometimes she comes out with some absolute zingers. So thank you so much for the super stickers. I've seen there's a few. I don't know how to bring them back up to see who gave them to me. So thank you so very much appreciated. As you know, I've just bought a new interface for my MacBook, and one thing that I hadn't mentioned is that my little oven that I use to bake all my clay in has basically crapped itself, so I have to buy a new one of those as well. So very much appreciated with the super thanks. Likewise, very much appreciated for the buy me a coffee and things like that. So thank you so much for coming in. Very much appreciated. So much appreciated. I will do my best to keep up with this routine with my live streams. Now, in terms of questions, comments and stuff, I would like to do another one like this. So if you have comments, even if you have comments relating to Maddie's case, because I'm more than happy to do a live stream talking about Maddie's case as well. I probably need to just prepare myself mentally beforehand. But please do in the comments section, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, observations, put them in the comments section, because I will come back to them. I think I will make this particular live stream each week. So for me, it's Monday morning. For many of you, it's Sunday evening. I will make this our discussion kind of live stream, where we just do a case discussion, and we can go off at tangents and talk about Maddie Soto or Brian Laundrie and the Dirty Laundry family. There was a channel called Dirty Laundry or something, wasn't there, that was covering Gabby's case. I wonder if that channel still exists. I wish I could remember what it was called. So yeah, please put things in the comments section if you've got questions or discussion ideas for next week's live. And yeah, it can be about any of these cases that I cover. Kylie Rodney, even if you've got questions, I know I spoke about her a bit yesterday in my members live stream. I did have a video that I was going to play in part of this live stream with Kylie, but I'm going to do that in a later live stream. But yeah, so next week, same time, same theme, we will continue looking at questions, topics, etc. So this will be the weekly informal kind of live stream. So thank you so much for coming in. I have greatly appreciated everyone being here. Greatly appreciate the super thanks. Love you all. So on that note, I'm going to go and cook myself something for lunch. So thank you for coming, and I will catch you again very, very soon.